displaced for 20 years and counting. We hope that these people will not have to add any more years to the time they have already spent away from home. Still on the subject of displaced northern Muslims, Shifan spoke with civil rights activist Mirak Rahim to find out more.
A 180-day program, as you know, is already unfolding in the north, and the government says that by the end of this year it plans to resettle what it has scaled down to a figure of 60% of IDPs. But there is no clear program of resettlement at the moment. And can you tell me, as a person from civil society, what sort of expectations must we have from the government?
As you pointed out, the government has unveiled this program, but there has been very little nitty-gritty and detail being provided so far. The only clear idea was that it would be 180 days and 80% of the current new IDPs. And as you pointed out, it's now scaled down from 80 to 60. At the moment, it appears the government is drawing up various plans regarding each of the sectors, be it shelter, be it education, be it medicine, be it livelihoods.
Right now, the focus is on the 300,000 people who are displaced in the north. But there are so many IDPs who have been, people who have been displaced on previous occasions, like, for instance, the North Muslims who have been homeless for now 20 years. In your view, what are their concerns at this moment?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really critical issue, because when one originally heard of the 180-day plan, it refers very specifically to new IDPs. So it didn't refer to the old IDPs. And when you look at the population of IDPs in Sri Lanka, it's 1:1 at least, which is old versus new. Roughly 286,000 new IDPs and another 300,000 old IDPs. So it's quite clear that there is this issue about what do we do with the old IDPs. And just to talk a bit about that, I think if you look at the breakdown, the largest population is the northern Muslim, but there's also a significant population, just under probably 80,000 from the Jaffna high security zones. So that obviously adds to that issue of what the government's plans are for them. In terms of the communities, I think...
Can I just interrupt you? Now, you did mention high security zones.
Yeah.
How are these zones going to hinder resettlement?
Yeah. At the moment, at least high security zones in Jaffna, they cover about 18% of Jaffna's territory, and basically there's no resettlement allowed in any of those areas. There is a current process to look at least one of the high security zones following a Supreme Court case, where there's a committee appointed to look at whether the periphery of the high security zone can be resettled. But I think basically the IDPs from that area are hoping that with the end of the war, what will come is a scaling back of the high security zones where all these areas get opened up. They acknowledge obviously the security concerns of the government, but what they say is, can't it start on being rolled back area by area, demining done, and you know, that area people can return back to their homes and cultivate their fields, and normalcy can be restored. Because ultimately that's what peace is about, when particularly those who've been most intensely affected, including the displaced, can experience some sense of normalcy, and that's, I think, what ultimately people want.
I want to go back again to the North Muslims, Mirak. Right now they feel that they are neglected because so many hundreds of thousands of people are displaced, and the government's new programs are including just a fraction of them. And they are concerned. I visited a camp last week, and people were saying we are waiting for buses to come and take them home, but there is no sign of that. And some people were expressing concern that their lands are being inhabited by other people. What have you heard about this, and how do you think the government should be working to address these people's concerns?
Those who were displaced in 2007 from Muslim division and moved to Puttalam, or even those from 1990, which is the year of the expulsion, who moved to Puttalam, have not been able to go back. So as you spoke about it, there is a genuine fear as to why they cannot resettle. So they are genuinely confused and don't understand the reasons given by various actors in Puttalam, and they're very determined to go back. And the significance of Musali is that it is the only Muslim majority division in the north, and therefore in a sense it's seen as very symbolic for the rest of the northern Muslim communities, that if they get to resettle there, that's an indicator of also the government's commitment to the resettlement of the northern Muslims as a whole. So the general story is that within the international organizations and even among civil society organizations and even politicians of other communities, there's a sense that the northern Muslim community would not return. And that's one of those kind of myths which has floated around. But there's a whole change in scenario, because now the LTT is no more as a huge military actor. And therefore there's an expectation among people that the scenario has changed so dramatically, and that peace is very, very possible in terms of a permanent peace. And therefore they think this is the opportunity when you can return. So you still have the opportunity where people should be given the right to choose, but that right of return must be paramount.
Speaking of the right to choose, I have heard that people have been offered the option of remaining in Puttlam or going elsewhere. Now, does the government plan to hold back people simply because it's not possible to send them back, or why do you think this is happening?
Again, it's this sort of black box where you're not sure what the government's thinking is. That's the main problem. But yeah, there's a lot of talk about, is it electoral politics that's basically holding back the resettlement? But it's very difficult to figure out. I mean, what is clear is when these people decide either way, if you opt for resettlement, then you are supposed to get a resettlement package. It should be in line with the guiding principles on internal displacement, so it has to be voluntary. But if people opt not to, then you get off the rations, and then you basically you integrate with the local community. And for that also there will be some form of assistance provided. So those are basically the two scenarios. But what must be clear is that people have the choice, and that their rights are guaranteed. The rights to their property, the rights to return, all of those.
I have a nagging question, Mirak. Who's monitoring this process of resettlement?
That again, I think it's like the situation in the camps, where even with regards to claims of whether food has been adequately provided or whether there are human rights abuses in the camps, there's a general difficulty in actually verifying violations. The government has announced that it is obviously any violation should be brought to its attention, and the relevant ministry and officers will look into it. But as you know, in Sri Lanka there's a general fear of reporting issues, especially to the government, and people tend to prefer going to religious leaders or civil society organizations or international actors. And so it's made it very difficult, because a lot of these actors are not able to verify. So that's why even with regards to resettlement, it's very important for the process to be open. And that there should be a process where internationals and local actors can go in, talk to communities, access them.
But
so
that's not possible so far, at least.
At the moment it hasn't been, but hopefully as the 180-day plan goes forward, as a civil society organization, obviously we hope that there is greater transparency, there's greater inclusiveness of the affected communities, there's greater participation. And obviously people do it on a voluntary basis, so that we hope that the whole process would be improved and become a much stronger process, and could also basically a building block to issues like reconciliation and actually a permanent peace. And this is the real test at the moment, that actually resettlement is a critical building block for how and if there will be permanent peace. Because there has been a military victory, but in order to build on that, you need to have a negotiated settlement and the return of normalization.